Before we start again, a phone has been found. A phone has been found with a fox behind. Does it belong to somebody? Okay. So welcome back. 3 more games to discover. And the first one is What Have We Done to Each Other? Enjoy.
Past is just a story you tell yourself. In 1995, Dove Point, Missouri, was one of the many places the iron-teeth serial killer chose to hit. Hope, a little girl, was awfully killed, leaving the town in shock and her family in mourning. In 2010, her cousins, Ava, Caleb, and Mia, discovered that Hope may not have been a victim of the serial killer. They will have to dive into gruesome family secrets to find the truth. So what really happened 15 years ago? Who killed Hope? Why? And what do the siblings really know about all of this? These are all the questions you will have to answer.
The way you see your past influences your perception of the present. Did you ever realize how much your past experience can change your interpretation of an event, and how your interpretation can be so far away from another's one? This idea is the starting point of our project. In What Have We Done to Each Other, you will experience a strong story, the exploration of different points of view linked to same events, coated in a dark, disturbing ambience. It is a solo interactive storytelling game for PS4 and PC, where the player will have to embody all 3 siblings who possess different memories and will have to investigate the family past as well as exploring their memories to collect information from their childhood. The story will be divided in 5 chapters, and alongside the main story, each one of them would have kind of their own plots. The first 3 will be centered on one of the main characters, then on the family as a whole, to end on the cluster formed by the siblings, when the player could experience different endings. Here you can see first concept of Mia, the youngest, and Eva, the older one of the siblings. As the story is in a realistic setting, their appearance is casual, but we use silhouettes, details and colors to give them appearances easy to identify and to differentiate from one another. Now, let me present you a small sequence of our gameplay. Let's imagine you control Mia, here in red, and you are in an environment, nothing special around you. But you can trigger what we call the memory mode. In this mode, you will be able to see Mia surrounding under another light that will highlight and make you able to interact with objects emotionally linked to her past. But sometimes you'd also be able to visit her memories to collect information. To do this, a QuickTime event will be needed to trigger the specific scene. Now you're in the past. It is not like our reality though, because it's Mia's vision of this period, how she lived it, and how she's remembering it. And now that you are here, you hear a blurry sound or see a blurry cutscene, and this is a memory, an information you must recomplete. You will have to find the right pieces in a limited time if you want to have the whole story and not only an incomplete one. So you come closer to the object, you try to interact with it. If it's not relevant for the memory, it stops here, but if it is, you have to execute a quick time event related to it. And if you succeed, you gain a piece of information related to the memory. If you fail, however, this information is lost for good. About the general atmosphere, we want to create a real differentiation between the past and present. So, in example, for the present, we think about using dull color palettes, kind of nostalgic ambiances, but for the past, we will use strong and vivid colors, because at that time, they were kids, and everything seemed more lively for them, and also in kind of way for this character, the past is still more real than the lives they have in the present. About the artistic dimension in the world, we will go for a semi-realistic with a touch of stylization. We would like to make contrast between characters and their environment, and so we are going to work with high poly characters and mid poly environment. Here you can see our first steps to experiment different moods on a single scene, and so we are making quick concepts using post-processing and rendering settings to experiment about this.
So for our sound direction, we want to create disturbing soundtrack with rich sound material to bring more depth in the action. We want to have a game universe with sound that do not necessarily reflect the reality. Also, as we are creating a narrative game, we want to put the priority on the dialogues, because it's here that we want to put the emotions. Also, we will use the Foley to accentuate the immersion. It will help you to build our own world. And finally, the silence will be a key element of the sound design part, because we want to be careful to not overload the sound in the environment. For the technical part, we will use Unity, and with that we will use a HD rendering pipeline, which will allow us to work on lights and make more contrast for our environment. Also, we will use Cinemachine because it's really important for us to have a good staging and to be able to use the camera the way we want. We will also use Rewired, as we want to use all the inputs of the PS4 and all the possibility from this controller. So why our game is unique is because we want to create a dark ambience, but also to put the player in multiple perception. He will be able to see same moment with the eyes of different characters, and to see the past and the present as an opposition or also a link between them. To the placement in the market, we want to target people of 18 plus years old, which are narrative games fan, but also who usually like games or story with strong ambiances and a dark mood. We thought about the economic system as an episodic one because we would like to use the feedbacks from the player to create the next episodes. Also, it will help you to find funds to continue the project. At the level of the marketing strategy, as we want to create an episodic system, we can create a strategy based on teasing. After each episode, we can think about teasing on social media or events, for example. So right now for us, which are our main challenges? First, the animation, because we really want to create realistic world, and we will have to put a lot of effort in that. Also the narration, because we want to test and iterate on the narration because we think it's the best way to do. So we are right now thinking about how we could test our narration the sooner as possible. And finally, the voices, as we want to record actors to make the voices of the game. Because of that, we created a timeline to see where we have important points. So first, we want to create a first prototype at the end of November, mostly to test our cameras and our ambiences and staging. So it's more to see how the player will move with the camera. At the same moment, we want to begin the animations, just the walk or the fact that someone is taking an object, something really simple, but we think we have to begin the earliest as possible. During the month of November, we will be developing the narration and doing tests and iterating on the narration to have a version that we can record, because we will not be able to record again. So it will have to be the final narration at mid-January that will allow us to have some time to polish. So right now, our biggest question is what we can show in our vertical slice. We thought about two ambiences to show the link and the opposition between past and present in the game. But also, we are asking us which moment of the game we want to show and if we want to create a technical performance. So if you have insights of our advice that can help us, we are open to that. So thank you for your attention. You can come to see us in the Plateau Project after that.
So time for questions. Thank you.
I have one if nobody is ready.
Maybe Audrey first.
So this is something you're going to hear a lot, and it's very annoying, but people are going to say, oh, this reminds me of this game. So here I'm going to go for it. Well, I was surprised not to see what remains of Edith Finch on your competitors or references. Is there any reason for that?
It's just that we wanted to show what we want to do. We also have references in another folder if you want to see it. But for example, one of our main references is Life is Strange, but also Detroit. So we just didn't want it to put all the games in the mind of the public right now. But
okay, thank you.
So why QuickTime event, and can you fail them?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite...
Why have you choose to have a QuickTime event, and can I fail the QuickTime event, and what happened?
When in your past sequence, if you fail the QuickTime event, you lost the opportunity to gain the information. If you are only in... if you are trying in the present to trigger a scene to go to a sequence in the past, I think you just have to retry it until it works. And do you want to answer?
Yeah. So in the past, you can't have like incomplete information at the end, and that changed the way you interpret your past. And why QuickTime events it's something that work in this type of games, and we didn't really want to innovate on this point. So we use this mechanics, and it's a good way to put challenge and in
Because in Detroit,
No,
please answer.
And also for QuickTime events, we want to avoid to use this as kind of a gadget. We also wanted to use something for the narration, so it will be only related to objects or items or maybe situations which are really important emotionally for the characters we are playing.
because you quote Detroit. In Detroit, when you fail a quick time event, you have different paths, different ways. So if you just have to retry, it's a skill check. So that's just that. And when we're talking about accessibility in game, you have a narrative game, so it could be an issue. Maybe there is an option for a disabled motor gamer or something like that.
Yeah, yes, it's something we talked about, not in the presentation, but working on the project to have an option.
Thanks.
Cool, thank you for the presentation. I think Audrey mentioned Edith Finch. It's a fantastic game, by the way. But it has like many gameplay elements. You know, you have like those games with like the wind or the snake. You do other things than only quick time events or these kind of things. What are the other gameplay elements you have in the game?
There will have a strong part of dialogues also, which for now we are not sure of what kind of challenge we put in the dialogues. Do we make like some different kinds of dialogues where challenges are dwelling in some different metrics? Yes. Sorry.
Like we have basically like three big types of gameplay. Like we have an investigator one. That is in dialogue, and when you explore, you can unlock options for dialogue that influence the narration. We have like QT part, and we have also moment of calm part, where it's like a break in the narration, and it's used to feel the bond between siblings and everything.
Yeah, I joined my colleague on the QTE part. It's interesting because when I was watching at your slides, I wasn't sure it was a QTE. It looked like a choice, and maybe if you have, you just said investigation. If you find in the past what was the right button, maybe in the present you have the gameplays to remember the most recent one, to replay the good one. But my question was originally about the dialogue you need to answer, to record. Sorry, how do you want to prepare for this? Do you think you need some tooling? Do you think you need some Excel sheets? Do you think how as a project management standpoint, would you prepare for this?
Well, for now we are not at this point to develop, but yes, I was speaking to, in the first time, think about the right tool for us. But as for now, we don't have the beginning of the dialogue. I just want to wait the narration part to begin, to really think about that. And so I want to have 1 week at least really concentrating on that for my part, and with the help of the sound designer and the narration, I think.
Hello. I want to maybe there's a question in here. At Telltale Games, the team structure was there were 2 full-time lead writers for every episode, and we would have to alternate episode development through the structure. So first question is, who are your writers? Whose full-time job is it to write? Okay, 1 person. Okay, keep that in mind when you talk about the ambition and scale. The second one is the game designers had to work with the writers in order to make sure that there were game elements that tied programmatically, that the technologist and the game designers and the writers all had to be in perfect sync to try to get the things prototyped and working while the story was being written. Where's that triangle?
Yes, so we have Fiona here, which is the link between the narrative part with Victoria and the gameplay part with Théo.
Okay, so what we discovered was that if you can get your writing done at the beginning, that you will, that's where you make as few changes as you can late in the process of actually developing the project. Get as much of the writing done at the beginning as you can, and don't carry changes late into development, because any change you make later, it touches so many things that it will break everything that you're doing. So this is a combination of a couple of questions and team structure and just some advice to front load all of your writing. So, and then you want to have a very good tool to make sure you have all of the branching dialogue that you want. And there are some good ones on the market right now that are available, so we can follow up after that. So,
okay, yes, thank you.
Some points.
Other question?
Thanks for the presentation. So you say you choose to do an episodic game, which is very hard, because you want to enjoy the feedback of the players. So I'm just curious, I just wanted to know which kind of feedback you think we'll be able to put in the next episode.
Well, we have to design the vertical slice right here. Well, it will not help, but in the idea that we are developing the whole game, I think that it could help us to change some parts of maybe of the bond between the siblings, for example, or stuff like that, and to gain a fan base thanks to that. I think it can be interesting for us.
It's interesting. Did you plan to build a kind of community very soon at the beginning?
Yeah, I think it will be the best for us, yeah.
Other questions? Yeah.
Okay. I have one in waiting.
Oh, go ahead.
You can talk, Audrey.
Okay. Yeah, I want to apologize for everybody. I keep interrupting, but I don't see you, so I don't know if you're about to speak. So yeah, it's always my same question is, what kind of team do you envision, and duration for this kind of game?
You mean if we had to develop it until the end? Yeah. Well, we didn't thought about that as we are at the beginning of the project and we are still in the conception phase. We only began a little bit of the production, but we still take the time. So yeah, I think right now it's a little bit earlier, but we will think about that for the next presentation and focus, I think.
I wanted to follow up on the earlier question about getting player feedback and using it in your episodes. Again, I'm going to keep going back to my experience where at Telltale Games we were doing 5 episodes to do a season. We would release episode 1. We were already developing episodes 2 and 3. So the feedback on 1 would really be only able to impact 4 and 5. And the feedback on 2 was only available for 5. And it made it very complex. And we always argued about whether it was worthwhile or not, because it often meant that episodes 4 and 5 got rewritten several times, and that was very expensive. Was it worthwhile? We always asked ourselves that. So I don't have a summation for that. We never did decide whether or not it was right or wrong to do. It was just very expensive to do. So, but you won't be able to react in episode 2 unless you have a huge gap between 1 and 2.
Yeah, we also know that narrative games is a huge challenge, and that's also why it's interesting for us. But we're all thinking about that and how, if we had to develop it until the end, it could be interesting to use the feedbacks, and I think it's still be interesting.
I have a question here.
Oh. This is an 18+ games, so I was wondering what level of violence you think you're going to have in the game.
Yeah, well, for now we are developing the global structure of the game, and so we are really at a really high level of the narration. That's why we don't really know for now, but we know that we want to show not necessarily really violent scenes, but the dark mood and kind of creepy and not feeling good ambience. So that's why we put the 18+. Also, at a moment, we thought about maybe showing some nudity or stuff like that. So we think it's the best choice for us.
Does the player have several choices or not? And if
yes, they have. During the is it working? Yeah. During the dialogues, when you during the investigation, you can also have you can't. We think about not letting the player being able to explore everything in the dialogues scene. So they will have to make choice about what they really think it's worth knowing, and so depending on the information they have, it could lead to something different, and also probably scenes, situation where there is a more clear branching than just fail or succeed.
Thank you. That would be the last question. Okay, so thank you again, and so let's welcome the next team and the next project, which is Witches Quarrel.
What do I have to press? Middle?
I guess you don't have to say it.
Okay. Where are the presentations lying? We have to open it here.
I have no idea.
Where? Sorry. Where do you have the folder with? Ah, here. Is it on Google?
I think.
Huh? The Google folder?
Yeah, go up again. Go to the root. This one.
No, it's not in there. Is it there? Don't you have it on the drive? Here? Internet Explorer? What is the link? I have it on a stick as well, if that works. Let's take it from the stick. Sorry. Okay. Is the stick working? No. Now it's working. Here. Okay.
Check. Hi, and welcome to this presentation of our project, which is Quarrel. So, let's put you into the mood for a start. The cold advances. The mighty forges, sources of life and magic, are under attack. You, an apprentice, must try your best to protect these places of great power. Assemble your puppet army and get ready for the quarrel. So, Witches Quarrel, what is it? Witches Quarrel is a mainstream, is a game, for mainstream players seeking accessible action. It's a tower defense-like first-person action game that gives the player control over order and chaos. So, unlike other takes on the niche tower defense genre, the gameplay focuses on physics-driven action crafting. So, to summarize, it's a first-person tower defense-like in single player. We are targeting young adults and teenagers between 13 and 26 years old. The game would be on PC, and it would be set in a low fantasy setting, focusing on the contrast between heat and cold, fire and snow. We are decided to use Unreal Engine 4 to develop the game for several reasons, because it's adequate for first person. We have a feature-rich physics system already built in the program, lots of AI capabilities, and lots of graphic tools that we intend on using, such as Niagara or Cascade. Our main points that we want to sell with the game, so the unique selling point is this idea of control over order and chaos with physics-driven action crafting mechanics. And the key selling points are spectacular visual effects, a thrilling near-death experience with numerous waves of enemies, and an action gameplay in a relatable and accessible settings. Our references for the gameplay of the game are as follows, so Sanctum, Control, the BioShock series, Call of Duty Zombie Mode, and Orcs Must Die. So let's talk about the creative direction. So the emphasis that we want to put in the creative and visual aspect of the game is contrast. We want to have contrast between heat and cold, light and shadow. We want to have this contrast in architecture as well, with structures made of wood and stone, but also shapes that can be geometric in opposition to organic settings and environments. We also want to have focus on ruins and molten metals, spark, lava, and everything incandescent to reinforce this contrast. We also want to make a setting that is atemporal, that is not set in a specific time frame or in a specific region, but still is low fantasy and accessible. So in terms of style, we want to have something that is lightly stylized and in a semi-realistic fashion. The music, we want to instill this idea of magic and dream and mysticism with references such as Harry Potter, Danny Elfman, the Tchaikovsky Waltz as well. We want to have some a dancing feeling, since the player will animate objects and golems and puppets. So in general, we also want to drive the point of spectacular light shows, dancing objects and movements, and all around spectacular. Here you can see some of the early concept arts regarding the architecture, environments, puppets, and the main character of the witch. So as you can see, we are still striving for this emphasis on contrast. I'm gonna let Hugo talk you through the main gameplay system of the game now.
So the gameplay of Witch's Quarrel special action-driven crafting action mechanics is, well, you have to protect this forge, and because it's under attack, and you also have to be careful to not die, because if you die, you can't protect the forge. It goes a bit fast. You protect the forge. That's the goal. But you're a witch. You have mighty powers, you have a magic ball, magic bouncing ball, because it's physically driven, and so you can push back your opponents. But it also bounces on all over the room and destroys basically everything around you. It's a big mess. Not the one that you think, but but it's not enough. The golems are still alive. What if you can create your own golem and in order to attack the other golem and protect the forge? But how would you do that? Well, now you have all these junks around you. Maybe you can do something with it. And so you use magic power, gather every object, and ta-da, create your own golem. So yeah, this is a Lego Harry Potter game, and without this kind of ways of objects are flying around is a kind of feeling that we want to achieve. And so here's the technical prototype of what we are going to do, but the first iteration. So you can aim to gather objects, and it's, wow, it's whoosh whoosh magic. I really love it actually, and I think we will try to make other way to manipulate object into the air. But yeah, next.
All right, let's get to marketing. The target we aim for is in generally first-person shooter, third-person open world players. So it's mainstream and soft fantasy interested people, mainly teenagers, young adults, Western audience potentially, and equally casual and hardcore. The primary target is the young adults. We want to be specifically gender inclusive, as you can be playing a witch. Yeah, the player we have in mind plays solo adventure, first-person games like BioShock or Dishonored, for example. The competitors and our positioning among them is on the x-axis, which is the more important to us, between reflection or strategy on the left and action on the right. And on the y-axis, we have story-driven games on the bottom and mechanics-driven games on the top. And we position ourselves on the heavily mechanics-driven action games. And you can see some of the potential competitors or inspirations on this chart. We did a SWOT analysis with the first stage that we have. On the strengths, we identified that we have a mainstream compatible setting. So the idea would be to popularize a niche genre. And we have strong physics-driven mechanics that can be playful in themselves and enjoyable when you play around with all the props in the world. Weaknesses can be that magic representation can be kind of cheesy or boring, so we wanted to do something original, for example, with the melting and metal stuff. Also, we have little to no story and strategy. We're really relying on the strong gameplay. Opportunities we see are, as I mentioned, to popularize a niche genre potentially, and to present our unique action crafting mechanics as fun for the player. On the threats, yeah, it's debatable whether strong competition is really a threat, but we have, for example, Fortnite Save the World, which might try to do a very similar thing with obviously kind of strong backup. The main risks we identified for the moment are that we have a lot of AI agents, so performance. One potential is we take an AI group leader, the rest of them just follows and has no individual pathfinding. We rely heavily on physics, so we will continuously need to work on stability and bug fixing in the process. Also, we have lots of props to model and animate. We might find ways to deal with this, like to use pre-made skeletal animations and assign our props to them, or using simplified models. For the team, we're 12. We're the biggest team here, so we have the luxury of having 3 artists with 1 specific FX artist, which is in our case very helpful, and also 3 game designers with a dedicated level designer. We have previous experience with Unreal Engine in the team, and we try to work with industry standards and tools as where possible, both as a training but also to have stable tools. And we also bring a strong physics background in the team in terms of knowledge, so that will probably prove helpful. Finally, to the next steps, the most important thing to us is finding the fun, as we heavily rely on gameplay, and we think you only can find the fun with a controller in the hand. So next is at the same time reducing uncertainty. You can see of the graph we have technical uncertainty on the bottom, on the x-axis, and game design uncertainty on the y. We basically started in the top right of the white arrow with the prototype and concept, and now we start to cross prototype in direction of pre-production line, and we aim in February finally to finish the pre-production and have more, or the best possible amount of knowledge and reduced uncertainty. We do this with a agile methodology, rapid prototyping, and aim to always have a small vertical slice each sprint that kind of grows over time, over the cycles. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. First questions?
Thank you very much for the presentation. You were mentioning agile and prototyping. When do you first expect to deliver a first prototype so we can see? My apologies, I didn't have the time to come up yet, but.
Yes, you can actually come up later. The first mechanics prototype is in the works. We also have, it's not integrated yet, but we have 3D pathfinding as an option, but it's still buggy. We have the basic game systems in there already, like menus and stuff. And next week we plan to start with whiteboxing the level design because it's still unclear in terms of open-closed environment. And yeah, we think that we're pretty much set with concept phase. There's some little questions maybe, but we really want to get hands-on next week.
Maybe I missed it, but I didn't hear your business model. What's your business model?
So far, we had just a premium conventional model in mind, but this might as well change. I think, honestly, for the moment, we're really focusing on the concept, on the prototyping, and we might answer those questions a little bit later in more detail, or they are subject to change.
Is that related to your open world versus level-based design? Is that you have too many unknowns still?
We're aiming for a level-based design, so with multiple forges and multiple environments. So the vertical slice will only focus on one level, but it's scalable in different ways that we already started to think about. And in terms of scope in general, I think one of the main reference we can have is a game like Orcs Must Die, that is a premium model. It's sold at, I think, 15 euros. And it would be a budget between 1.5 and 2 million euros if we wanted to do it properly as a full-scale game. But still on the AA side with a price tag of 15 to 20 euros. That's the competition that we have for that kind of game. But again, it's still very early in the conception phase. We're open to different ideas for the future.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a question, Audrey?
Yeah, I've lost focus on the camera, which is okay. I can still see faces, but I'm just.
Okay, we're gonna try to fix that in between.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
So just I see it's only PC, right? So you basically throw your ball with the mouse.
Yes, for now the controls are mainly PC. It could be possible to adapt it with a controller, but for now we are really focusing on the PC gameplay.
I have a question on behalf of Audrey. You mentioned you wanted to be gender inclusive. How do you plan to do that and deliver that?
Basically, you're in a first-person player game. So A, you can imagine a lot, and B, there's several possibilities. Like, we think that you will see your hands in front of you. In the long term, there could be like hand customization. We joked a bit about like a slider where you can adjust your age, for example, with like the hand becoming like this or so. We don't know if we can do this in the beginning, and if it's so important. We can easily like have voice acting that's just different, like little hook lines that the character says, and it can be female, it can be male, it can be something in between female with male hands, whatever. I think that's kind of simple means to give a lot of freedom.
And why did you limit your target to the was it 1326? Why only 26?
If you want to answer it.
Yeah, so the idea was to like, we already have a big range, but it's more young audience, so that's the target, that's the people we made the game for. But if you are more than 26, you can obviously play the game. But for all purposes of testing and such, it's better to have a clear defined target, because if for playtesting, for example, we look a bit older, maybe we're gonna have dissonance and stuff like that. That's why we limit around 26, but 27, 28, it's the same.
I'm 33, by the way.
Yeah, and I'm 29. But yeah, I think the main point is that this is the core target. But as we said at the beginning, we aim for a mainstream audience. So obviously, it's way broader than just this age range.
The reason why I'm saying that is that just for information, and I had the conversation before with another group, is that the average age of gamers in France is 40 years old. I think it's important to know.
One small differentiation that might be there, I'm not sure if you're 100% solid with that, but a thought was that we don't primarily look at the distribution of overall game players that include mobile players and so on, where also gender is way more equal, but more on the action first-person genre, where we have the impression, again, no clear reference given right now, that the gender distribution is not as equal so far. But we have to investigate that more, maybe.
I was gonna ask you, because I'm interested, because if you have information like that, I wonder why I don't have it. How do you know what's the audience of your competition games?
Sorry, the last part?
How do you know the audience? How do you know the audience of the games you are trying to beat, your competitors?
We don't know it yet. We're still looking into it. For the start about 50-50 and 30, even sometimes it's 40 years old. Like these stats also include mobile gamers, so mobile games, so they need to be taken with some precaution and everything. So we don't want to assume this stat as a number. We don't basically we just don't assume anything yet. We're still looking into it a lot. We've made some survey on Reddit to try to understand better our target and stuff like that to create a persona, but we're still looking to really define our persona. And even in Reddit, which yes, it's mainly male on Reddit in the US, but we have even more male answers than female.
I have a question about the IA. Have you planned the storyline of the IA for the NPC character? For the NPC, sorry. And because this is very important in the FPS game.
Sorry, I didn't understand the question part.
The IA for the NPC. Have you planned the storyline of the different NPC? No.
I'm not sure if this answers your question, but I think it's kind of like pretty simple in terms of like this is where like tower defense inspiration is, that just enemies come along certain paths towards you, they try to attack you and your pressure.
Well,
and
yes,
that's
but you can create golem, and after they have their own lives, and what they do, I don't know.
Yeah, as we said, these for the puppets that the player creates will probably be restricted to a certain area and will automatically attack the enemies coming along some path. So we're still looking into it. We haven't really prototyped it yet as much. So it's a work in process. But this is where our tower defense inspiration came in. We still have this small tactical aspect of positioning your minions, and we're going to develop and think through the ranges and capabilities of these puppets. But in the spirit, they would remain in a certain zone, and we'll have a certain area of effect. At least for the puppets that the player creates, and the enemy minions would come along paths. This is also a matter of level design, so we'll refine that as we prototype and as we go. But the main idea is to have this mechanic focused on positioning, at least for this action crafting mechanic.
Okay, okay. Thank you for the humor. Okay. Thank you for the humor of the presentation. I think it was delightful, actually. And I have one question about the golems. Actually, I understand how you build them. You take parts and you assemble them. But when you assemble them, what parts are used to define what kind of golems? Actually, I just understood that I took some things, placed them together. I have a golem, but what kind of golem? What is his abilities? What is the interest of that? And does the player understand what kind of golem will be created if I mix this and this part? For me, it's quite blurry for the moment.
It was a question that do we make something more crafty so we can choose what parts does what and individually on the golems and what kind of golems we can make, or do we make it more action and be less and let the player be less in charge of what objects and how to manage them? And it's still a question that we want to answer by prototyping and what is funniest. And for now, we are more on the action part. And so, what is the best feeling in terms of game feel to create golems, and it will come after the questions of do we make different golems and how? But yeah.
Yes, yes, I have a question. You say that it's gender inclusive. You are talking about witches, and I think why not age inclusive? My question is that I see more and more people 80 years old playing because it's a way to not feeling alone and working in the brain, and it can be because it's witches. And witches are old normally. Why don't open this to a playground with virtual grandparents? They are fantastic witches. So why not try to play in this virtual playground where you can be 80 years old and be 13 years in the play, or the opposite, or having your age?
Well, again, since we are aiming for a mainstream audience, the game is open for all ages. There is no age restriction. The violence isn't gory. There's no blood, so a kid can play it as well as a grandparent. The main targets that we defined in this presentation was just who are we building the game for mainly. But of course, since our ambitions are to make a mainstream game, it could be played by anyone, and we present the game as a game that can be played by everyone, pretty much. So no worries on that side.
Hello. A question about the motivation, the fruition. So what motivates the player to succeed? Do you have a succession of levels? Or is it just map with leaderboards or something like that? And did you consider, it's another question, did you consider multiplayer? Because you quote Call of Duty Zombies, which is quite fun because you're few players, and if you're a single player, it's not that fun.
Well, the first question first. So the idea would be to have multiple levels with different atmosphere and different mechanics. For instance, the vertical slice that we're doing will focus on the metal crafting and blacksmithing kind of magic with a lot of metal. But we can imagine to having a level with nature and plants, for instance, so the gameplay could be a bit different on that side. And inside a level, the progression would be kind of similar to a tower defense game again, but with minimal resource management. So instead of having different resources, all the resources is the clutter around the player. So by defeating enemies, you can also use their parts to create more minions on your side. And so this is how we envision the progression inside one level. And in between levels, we could imagine adding different powers to the witch. For instance, in the vertical slice, as described by Hugo, you have like a magic ball that you can use to push enemies and to break stuff, so that you have more clutter and more objects to use to create minions. But there could be plenty of all the magical powers that the player could unlock as they go. And yeah, the possibilities are really pretty much endless. But since we are in the bottom-up process, we really want to make sure that the mechanic works in its simplest form, and then see what we can add without breaking the fun that we found and the system that we prototyped. But yeah, plenty of options.
And for the second question, we already did in one sprint a spike to estimate the challenges for multiplayer. We decided to not do it. First of all, because like multiplayer is nothing worth without the solid gameplay that we need to have in this type of game. And secondly, it's then risk management and time. It involves a lot of more resources, both in terms for art creation. You need to see the other player when you walk around potentially, all that stuff. So we said, like, we will not do it in the time that we have. We focus on the one thing that we think is strong. But I think, or we think, yes, it might potentially be an idea that might fit the genre type of game well.
Yeah, Yannick here. Thank you for the presentation, congrats for the cosplay. We've moved from a very narrative game to a low narrative game here. So the fun is going to be in the gameplay. You've talked about that. How do you plan to make sure it's fun and balanced? Do you plan weeks of playtesting or using mathematical modeling or?
Both playtesting a lot. We have a UX designer that will take care a lot of playtesting and organizing that, and like giving us information and data to inform our designs. But as well, we planned in each sprint to take our time at the end in each cycle to play the game together, like have an internal playtesting as well, and like constantly see how the parts go together and basically try to fail early and stand up again and try something new. We don't want to work in mental constructs all the time. We just want to try to put it into practice, see if it's actually fun or not, and then move on.
I see two more questions.
Yes, it was fun. Presentation structure is also good. Just a quick note first, and maybe I'm a bit picky, and I'm sure it's not what you guys have in mind, but FPS with like metal and magic on which might not be very mainstream. Maybe it's an accessible game that you want to do more than mainstream game, I don't know. Just a side note, question about physics. Physics driven, I think is pretty fun. So I see that you can throw like bolts of fires, and I imagine the minions stumble. So it's where you have physics, right? And you have physics, I guess, also collisions among the minions, so you can see them like stumble from the right onto the left and fall and this kind of stuff. Is it the idea? Okay. The golem you create yourself also will have physics. So if you throw like the bolt to him, he might also stumble and fall on other like characters. I try to project myself in the game.
That's a maybe.
Okay.
We have to try that. I think what we already have in mind is like, especially with this ball that you also have, that you be able to interact like with special objects that then drop resources basically, and also be physics based.
Okay.
I think probably how much physics interaction we can align with the animation of characters will be seen. It's to find out.
Okay. And so I understand a bit like the game flow. So you attack those golems or those enemies. They can like give you like loots or things you can gather to create the golems. So your positioning will be key. You'll have to throw things, go there, gather, move a lot, and stuff. Okay, I get it. Cool, thank you.
Just for your first part comment about yeah, we're most likely not mainstream, but our idea is more our strategy to take a niche genre, take maybe a niche universe, and trying to put it mainstream, like Harry Potter or like Hearthstone for the TCG.
I don't know if you ever think about the design of the enemies. Did you have something or not already?
For now, it's not set in stone. I think the main idea for now, which is a work in progress again, is to have puppets as well. So they will share a bunch of characteristics with the puppets that the player do. Of course, they gotta be mean looking. They gotta be threatening. But the idea is to, again, when you defeat an enemy, the enemy will drop props that you can use for your own golems. So there would be some similarities between the two. But for now, the enemies aren't really designed. So it can change, of course. It can be multiple things. Same goes with the scenario. We want to have a clear idea of what the story of the game, the background could be before starting designing.
I say that because I think about the age limit of your game. But if you design the enemies with inspired by the real enemies of the witches in the past, it can be very fun for the player, especially with the female players.
Oh yes, it could be an idea. But yeah, every idea is good to take right now since we're not decided yet. But it's an idea we can explore.
Thank you. We're gonna finish here. Thank you again.
Thank you all. And obviously you can see us at the project floor if you are curious to see the first prototype. It's the last box at the end of the floor.
And
Thank you.
Before to do so, let's hear the last group and have a big mess coming.
Hello everyone. Thank you for still being here for the last presentation. We hope you'll enjoy it. As an introduction, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever been argued by your parents because you didn't tidy up your bedroom? Yeah, thank you guys. Our game, A Big Mess, is close to this memory. In A Big Mess, you embody an alien who is playing football with his friends. But as we are in an alien world, they're playing football with the Earth. At some point, your mom comes and say, "Hey kids, stop playing. It's time to hit. Tidy up what you've done." Your goal in A Big Mess is to go on the Earth and tidy the mess you made. Valiant?
Bonjour. So the main idea of the game, it's a feel-good cooperative puzzle game with a 3D dollhouse view. The players are running around. It's a multiplayer game. They can interact with each objects, both physics-based and not physics-based, and solve puzzles. They get a goal to achieve, and they can interact with the world to achieve this goal. It's aimed for 1 to 4 players, but the vertical slice is focused on 2 players only. Our target audience is young adults, couples, duos, so people playing together, but we are going to talk a little bit about it later. and our main target platform is Nintendo Switch and PC.
Okay, so what's the game? Let's tidy up. So it's not the final view, but it's just to see the possibilities in the game and how it works. So you have two players, and you have a task at the top of the screen. Move wardrobe. So, okay, they cooperate, they carry it, and they put it in the right place. Okay. So now, yeah, that's a success. Well, and now you have to connect the fridge. Okay, connect the fridge. So go to the kitchen and connect it. Wow, success, wonderful. And so now, clean shoes. So the player red, take the brush, clean the shoes, wash it, and the blue one, take it and store the shoes in the wardrobe. Okay, that's a success.
So the main idea of the game is, in one hand, cooperation. So we'll enforce the players to cooperate, to communicate with each other, and to have this unavoidable chaos. No matter how much they try, things will fall apart. And the most important feature is this creative cleaning, which is about experimentation. There are objects, game objects, which interact with each other in a certain way, and the player have to try out to see what actions they offer. As well as there's this contrast between the classical and the in-game cleaning rules. So as a human, if you are told, put the wardrobe in the right move the wardrobe, you put it back. But for aliens, these maybe work a little bit differently. And because of this experimentation and what you will see very soon, the game offers a lot of replayability.
Well, storyboard again. Let's try again. Okay, now move wardrobe. Okay, why not? Yeah, we technically we move it. So okay, that works. So now connect the fridge. Yeah, why in the kitchen when you can connect the fridge in the bathroom? Okay. And you know you have to clean the shoes, and yeah, you can clean the shoes in the toilet. Why not? Yes, wash it. The shoes are clean, and now we can store the shoes in the fridge. Okay, well done, guys. Woo! About alien design. So what kind of character you play? You play a customized character. You can add your own character, changing the ball size of body, the color, and this kind of stuff. For the vertical slice environment, we just for vertical slice focus on one level to polish it. And so it's a kind of English grandmother house. It's like this family house where the kids left the place, and so you can find some objects from childhood and memories, and that's storytelling about environment. You can find an object, and that's tell you a story about memories and childhood memories, this kind of stuff, and family. For the general visual, it's like the stop motion feeling. We want to create low poly meshes, but with realistic texture and lighting, and also play with tilt shift effect and post process to give this stop motion effect with a depth of field and camera and focal like in stop motion. And so also play with everyday objects like day-to-day life, and this for environmental storytelling. And also objects with multi-purposes to push the player to be creative with multiple functions from objects. And then also, finally, funny animation, like smooth animation and something very smooth to make the game more dynamic. And that's the mood for the game.
So the main idea in terms of audio is we are going to create Foley recordings based on real-life objects. And one of the key features for audio is to bring all the essential audio feedbacks. There's a lot of different objects interacting with each other, and the player has to learn if this interaction was successful and to learn about basically directions. Also, it serves, of course, to create an emotional response from the player, to give the field similar feel to what the animation and the art does. The whole game is essentially about playing and play and about cleaning up in this very playful environment. The musical style will also represent this in a cheerful and rousing tone. Other than this, there's going to be an in-game radio present as an actual game object, which the players can throw out, flush down the toilet, or turn on and off, which is going to serve as the audio narrator. We can put in different broadcasted shows from the world of the game, such as a news broadcast or something like this, which also serves as a narrative tool for the game. And we identified these three development challenges. Number one is to highlight the specificities which we have and our competition doesn't, such as Overcooked and Untitled Goose Game. We are going very much into this experimental direction that the player has to learn and learn and learn to really get to understand more in depth the whole game. In terms of development, there's the whole object items interaction mechanic, which serves as a great challenge to tackle. And for design, we have to make sure to keep the players' collaboration as the main pillar, as we mentioned, the multiplayer part, so not focus too much on other elements, but to keep the multiplayer fun in the focus.
As far as we are working on the game, we always keep in mind the marketing and communication aspect. First, we want to communicate. We want to make a communication. We want to make an intergenerational communication, because our game will be playable for old and young people, also non-gamer and hardcore gamer. Also, we are thinking to create a free seasonal event, change the asset of the game to match with Christmas or Halloween. Why not build strong partnerships with well-known IPs to make the player able to play inside the Simpsons house or with a Rick and Morty environment. We want to create short videos with an offbeat spirit to show some interaction that you will be able to make inside the game. And finally, Twitch, because this kind of game has a big potential for streamers, because it's a lot about oral communication and unexpected object interactions. So remember, A Big Mess, it's a couch co-op game. It's playable with non-gamers. We have an original narration with our environmental storytelling and a lot of experimentation with objects. Thank you for your attention, and we are ready for your question.
So, who's gonna start with the questions? Yeah, David.
One to four players, couch play. There's a number of games that are like that. They mostly depend upon replayability because you're interacting with each other. This feels like it's depending upon replayability through interacting with objects. Is that correct? Do you have enough confidence in the variety of objects and the ability to add additional objects that you think you can have strong long-term replayability?
So, of course, as it's a couch co-op game, it's a lot about also replayability in terms of playing with other people. By the interaction, we mean that in a general playthrough, people will not encounter a huge part of the game. And for example, by grading the player's performance based on time, we enforce them to come up with creative ways to solve a certain task.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Hello, thanks for the presentation. As you are an alien, is there just one way to dispose and clean the room? Or you know, because you say with an alien, for an alien it's going to be different. But is there a different way you have to dispose the objects on the room after, or there's just one way, one solution?
There's one goal, such as move the certain object, and there's many solutions. The point of like the whole flow of the game would look like the player gets an objective which is very obvious for a human, such as move wardrobe. We would immediately think that the game assumes that we are going to put the object back in place. So we start behaving like this, and at some point there's the moment when we realize, oh, actually it's enough if I just push it a little bit left. So there's many ways when it gets accepted. You can wash the shoe with a sponge or with a brush or with a toilet. So there's many ways. It was just a silly version of like when everything goes in a messy way. That was the second storyboard. But no, each problem has many different solutions, and kind of the point of the game and the joke is that the player will at some point realize this.
So there is no one way better than another.
No.
Okay, thank you.
On the same subject, we planned on playing with feedbacks, so that the player will know that he can validate a task without being in the human way all along the process. Like moving the wardrobe, as soon as you move the wardrobe, the task can be validated, and so you realize that you can do silly things like this, because aliens, especially kids aliens, won't have the same perceptions to tidying and cleaning things that we do as humans.
Did you get more points because you were faster?
Yeah. It's basically we are still researching about replayability with the scoring, and we are not very fond of scoring actions, but we think about the time for the replayability, so we can suggest to players that they can do it quickly. So, like for example, the fridge, you can plug it directly in the bathroom. If he is already in the bathroom, it's okay, and that's how we managed to do this.
Oh.
Sorry. You're planning on PC and Switch, I believe. Why did you exclude mobile?
Because our core pillar for the experience is the coach co-op game. So when we imagine mechanics, we always put ourselves in as a players and always on a coach playing the game. And I think with the mobile, it's more you're playing alone on mobile. You don't very often play with someone else with your mobile, and I think it's too far away from our main intention.
Yep. Another question is coming.
But you started to answer my question. I was wondering how you're going to manage the scoring system, or how are you going to manage or to push the player to make the mess in your room? What is it, the real interest for the player? Except just to have the fun to make the mess, but at a certain point, I think you will have to manage this, the motivation.
So regarding the score, currently we think there's no score, there's only time. So there's no better way to solve, but you can do it faster. And how to encourage that, we are going to like, that's kind of the specific work, how people come to this realization, and we'll try to plant very huge changes in the world. When you do something silly, then a huge change happens, like a wall opens and there was another room all along. And also, this is something which we are working on in the design department and talking with everybody, how to do exactly that, is to how to show people that there's many other objectives, either by achievements or by connecting different items or different endings. The main source of encouragement would be through if we grade the players by time, but this is not something which is forced.
Okay, thank you.
Hi. I find that is fantastic to take the mess and transforming it into kawaii. I think this process of being kawaii after a mess, even the mess is kawaii, but it's fantastic because it's very playful and it gives you the motivation to bring things to another kind of life, and that's it. Keep it kawaii, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. I've been playing the Goose Game and also Move Out, that I guess is also one of your references. And in Goose, you just have a list and you do whatever you want, whenever you want, basically. And in Moving Out or in Overcooked, you actually know what you have to do, and you have to do it very quickly. And the challenge and the cooperation comes from the fact that, like, yeah, you bump into walls or you have to coordinate. But here, where is going to be the coordination between the player? What's the core of the coordination between the players?
Okay, you have one task after one task, and so you can imagine a situation that causes a problem because, I don't know, you have a table and you have to put the dishes on the table because you have to maybe prepare the dinner, I don't know. And after that, so you succeed your task and you see another task, and the task is put the cover on the table, but you just already put the dishes. So maybe you can just break the table, put the cover, and after that again put the dishes. It's like you have a list, but yeah, that creates a big mess because you have not all elements of different tasks. So sometimes you have mistakes or some kind of thing.
I get it for the list, thank you. And then for the coordination between the players, how can you help each other or not, or is it just complete chaos and that's already fun enough?
I mean, there's numerous tasks right now, how we see it, which require multiple people, such as moving a table. And if you imagine the real world, it's already quite a difficult thing to move a table. Who turns the table which direction? So basically, there's one task which both players have to solve, and they have to communicate how to approach this. So one has to open the thing, and the other has to close the thing. And if we will have a little bit of involvement of physics, which makes the whole thing a little more janky. And in that case, it's that adds to this challenge. So the cooperation part comes into how do we approach the following task.
Thank you.
Thank you. About the design, does the alien have another abilities than the human being? For example, 4 arms or something else? I don't know.
Not yet, but that would be cute.
Yeah, because you speak about the funny animations, so that's it.
I mean, because they are aliens, they probably don't hear the same as us. So we are planning to create some silly stuff with the radio, like you are an alien, you don't understand the podcast and the music, so it's not a superpower, it's not helpful to clean, but it can be fun. So this is probably the gift of those aliens, not to understand us.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah, thank you. It's a nice project. I was just wondering, being curious, why did you choose to be in a realistic environment? You mentioned, I think, rendering and an English grandma house with a lot of details, and so can you give me some? Thank you.
Honestly, it's for me as a graphist to give me more challenge to do texture, because that's what I want to do, and to emphasize the differences between aliens that will be cute and goofy and the real world where we live. And it's also a way, even if we are doing low poly, because we will see the entire house, so we won't have to give a lot of detail on modelization. With realism, with realist texture, we can play with all the things we want to touch in a dollhouse, like wool or leather and some stuff. And that's what I really like in stop motion animation, the way they turn objects we use, but we rediscover them in a new angle, and that's what we want to do.
And Yes, maybe just it's an additional question. It's do you intend to be able to manipulate objects that are not targets for actions? I don't know, like objects that are not useful and that can add to the mess or to the new organization.
To that question, yes. There will be lots of objects, and you can interact with them because even it gives you the opportunity to experiment and just having only the objects that are interactable that you can hold. It gives you part of the solution. So figuring which objects are useful is part of the fun too. And for the realistic environment, the idea was also that we didn't want to have a generic house 1, generic house 2, generic park 1. So by researching on particular characters like the English grandmother, in a house the kids grew up and left the place, but they also left here some objects. So we can tell a story of the people through their objects and give objects a new meaning too that we don't often see in games, and just to have a coherence and
you mentioned Twitch. I think you're the only group who did that. Was it more just about the streamer and viewer, or was it also about maybe creating some Twitch add-on for viewers to spawn object, or maybe have interaction like, I don't know, reversible gravities or things like that?
Okay, for now we imagine, because we imagine the tools for us, and so we talk about a tool to create a task. So like player 1 or both player move, wardrobe. Yes, I create my task, and so for us. But we can imagine maybe to just suggest this tool for viewers and streamers. So maybe streamers are playing the game, and so viewers just suggest a task that, and so people vote, and so the streamer have a new task now because viewers suggest this task, maybe.
There's also the thing that we are considering to make UI realistic, or the first extra diegetic and after diegetic, and then we can have like a alien technology of materializing thing, and we have like this cube of information that can embody the task you have to do, that the alien can consult. And if we are going on this, we can totally make the viewers materialize things for us to tidy more, and to get rid of, like flushing in the toilets or getting it in the trash.
A last question or comment? Okay, so maybe we're gonna end here. And as it was said just before, you can see all the projects at the bottom. So thank you, guys. Thank you. And thank you all for having followed this whole presentation. Thank you, and I would like to thank again all the teams that presented their games today. I hope you enjoyed all as much as we did. And so please give a last round of applause to all the teams. And for the one who has still time, because it's not so late, it's 20 past 4, please go see and exchange with the students, and see you next time for the improvements. Thank you.